Name is Hank Muntzer, and last name is Muntzer. And if anyone wishes to follow me to keep up to date, because obviously we do a news report, it's very hard to get all the story out and all the information. So we're going to post this so everyone can see the rest of it as well, so they understand a little bit of the story of what I went through. But anyhow, it's under Joshua Muntzer. There's two of them, but has my picture on it. And that's how I keep people informed, because I've been banned so many times. But really what I've been through is, and this is the story that hasn't been told, especially on January 6th, you know, I was basically led into the Capitol, just like me inviting you over to your house. And then as soon as I get into your home, you assault me and basically call the police and have me arrested. So that's what every January 6er went through. And it was a staged event. Our government was behind it. This is tyranny, you know, on the American people. And that's a story that really hasn't been told. The narrative by the news media and everything else has skewed it, that, you know, 3 officers died that day and blah, blah, blah. You know how the news report went. What really happened that day was 3 January 6ers died. No officers died. They lied about everything. One lady, whose name was Bolin, she was the one right there at the opening where you saw all the violence and stuff. And that happened because an officer beat her to death with a baton, and she died, and then everyone got upset. And then you have people in the crowd that did nothing. They were way behind everybody else. I mean, there must have been 20, 30, or 100 people back, and they just started shooting bullets and shooting tear gas canisters at people, and they really incited a situation there. Everyone was there peacefully, and even where I was. I didn't even know this violence went on until I got back to my apartment that night. And I'm like, what did I miss? You know, I didn't even get it. From what I saw on the news that day in DC, it looked like the Capitol's on fire, people are getting beat up, it was a huge riot. That's how I took it when I got back, and I was there, and I'm like, I didn't see any of that.
Did you go in and what do you're saying when you went in, you saw nothing of?
I heard the tear gas canisters going off, and so only reason I was where I was at, so I had got to the Capitol and there was a pile of people all the way around. You couldn't even see the grass from the Capitol. This is facing the Washington Mountain. There's people everywhere, and I have pictures I can give you. So I had no idea what was happening at that point. So we started working our way through the crowd a little bit to work our way up towards what looked like the stairway going up to the Capitol and where the inaugural stage is. And a couple women had come down and said the Capitol Police were tear gassing and doing pepper spray. We could hear booms in the background, but it was so noisy you couldn't identify really what it was. I mean, it's just millions of people there. So as we walked our way up, we couldn't go to the left, went to the right to the inaugural stage. And then that's when I got there, and there's a whole bunch of guards with helmet and goggles on, and these people waved us in behind us. And so I think a lot of them people were either Antifa or agents. Matter of fact, we have one officer said that he was dressed up in the crowd as Antifa among the Trump supporters and showed his badge to the Capitol Police. So there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. Now we're finding out there was well over 1,000 agents that were there that day, and so the whole thing was a trap for all of us.
You went in eventually. I assume you went in the Capitol.
Yeah. So
what was your intent going in that day?
Well, see, that's the funny part, because I actually did a news interview, and they tried to use it in my court case, saying that I was there to interrupt Congress. Well, I didn't even know the vote count was going on. I didn't know what was going on. I basically showed up because I wanted to be there to stop the steal, you know, and I didn't even know where the Capitol was. Trump told us to go there peacefully and patriotically. And then I did a news interview and stuff, and then they said because, and I basically said because I was there, we're there to prevent Congress from committing treason, which they did anyways. So then they tried to use it against you. But see, it's what you knew and when you knew it. On the other side of the coin, the very charge they used against us was the 1512, which is the Enron case, which Enron did some illegal things. So what they did is they used paperwork to interrupt Congress. So they tried to use that against us to convict us for 20-year sentences, which when it went to the Supreme Court, they ruled that they can't use it that way. It has to be used as it was written. So unless we were involved in paperwork to interrupt Congress, they couldn't use it that way. What we see in our judicial system, and this is what should concern all of us, we used to be a constitutional republic, not a democracy like we have now, which is basically a laws, just like British rule. Laws for thee and not for me. So we established a thing called case law, and this is what happened. I've got in trouble with other January 6ers. I get mad when I bring it up. I said if every January 6er would have fought this thing in the beginning, we could have got to the Supreme Court, we could have overruled what was going on. Because they established case law, they ramrodded the rest of us. We couldn't even bring evidence into court. I got lots of Brady Law violations. They withheld evidence. And basically, we couldn't even bring witnesses or anything in. So it was a dog and pony show. And it's 100% conviction rate. So we have people that can operate in government that are above the law, that aren't held accountable, and people like us who want to stand up and say things aren't right. You know, you can't do this. We have the right to bring our grievances, you know, to our government, and yet they'll beat us up and they'll do whatever they need to do in order to keep us servants. And I always say, you know, there was a time in history where we had slaves. And the nice part about slaves is at least they knew they were slaves. You know, the problem with the American people right now is we're all slaves and we don't recognize it. That's the real problem. And that's what we need to fix. We need to get back to fair weights and measures in government, equality, whether you're in government or whether you're just a peasant. We need to have the same rights. And if we don't have that, we have tyranny. And if I can tell you anything I'm fighting for right now, you know, and what makes America great is our ability to stop tyranny, and I'll stand against it at all costs. And like our founding father said, those who give up liberty for security deserve neither. And so our fight is to make sure that we stay free.
You said that all happened. You went through a very major thing. You got convicted. You were sent. I want to know, when did you find out? Where were you when you first found out you were pardoned? And what did you do?
So I was pardoned on January 20th. And it was great because when I was at the prison, I told the prisoners, I will be out of here. That'll happen. No one believed me. They said, even if it happens, it's going to take you 3 weeks, a month, whatever it's going to take to get out of here. And I laughed. I'm like, no, it'll happen. It'll happen today. So they called me out of my prison cell. I think it was about 3:45. And then, I don't know if you know why prison works, but anyhow, so everyone's out of their cells and we're all on, there's 3 levels. So when they realized I was getting out and I was being released, they all started jumping up and down. They made so much noise. They were jumping on things, going, fight, fight, fight. I mean, the whole pod erupted, which normally that gets you thrown in the hole because you're inciting a situation. But they were so happy for me because everyone knew the story. You know, they saw what was going on. So
these weren't fellow January 6ers. These were just other prisoners.
Just other, yeah. I never saw another January 6er in the location I was at. I was supposed to go to what they call a low security prison, which where they sent me was Lompoc 1. And this is the prison where they took people from Alcatraz and put them. So you got to understand, they run it as a USP, which is a high security. So we're locked down. They check every 2 hours. I mean, it's just a crazy situation. We're right next to it. The other is a lower case, is what they call a camp. It's almost like, I mean, you can pretty much go anywhere. You're not really fenced off. You're kind of in a day camp. You can drive vehicles around, whatever it is. But they had me in a real high security area, which I don't know why, but that wasn't.
Where was it? I'm sorry.
So Lompoc, that's in California by LA.
Okay, so that's where you were. How long were you in?
So I self-surrendered on the 3rd. I was in there 17 days, which is Q. First time I was arrested was January 20th. This was in 2021 on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is on my building. And you got to understand, I painted this whole building long before any of this happened. And then I was pardoned on January 20th, which is also Martin Luther King Jr. Day. A lot of coincidences or God's providence, however you want to look at it, but I think it's very exciting. And it's a great time to be alive because then I can point out what happens in our prison systems, you know, what's going on there. We need to change them. There's people that are locked up that shouldn't be locked up. People who have done things, you know, a lot of times people will be in there for drugs. I mean, and here's what's really sad about our system. They'll be in there for drugs and they'll get a 15 or 20 year because they had extra drugs on them because they were selling to create their, you know, so they can have their own habit because they can't afford it because drugs are real expensive, you know. And a lot of these people get really high convictions. So we have these prisons full and then we're not rehabilitating them. All we're doing in these prisons, is, you know, taking up space, and we're giving them drugs when they're in prison because they put them all on Taboxone. And they just keep them on this whole, I guess, a high all the time, the whole time they're in there. So we're not really rehabilitating people.
Have you ever been to prison before this?
Just that 4 days that I went to jail, you know, right after January 6th. That was the only time.
Okay, but never, so this is really, but before January 6th, you never had experience in there. Have you looked, so you saw something, I mean, how did that change you? What, 17 days?
17 days, you know, for me it was, you know, believe it or not, I told everyone to be like a vacation. And it actually was. I mean, other than putting up with the guards, which I'm like, what did I do wrong? You know, just the things that the guards would pull. There's no reason. It's not like they even tell you there's a set of rules or do this or do that. I mean, I could have got locked down in the pod. I'll give you an example how bad it is. We had this one guy that was an officer, and I was told a story, another person went through this. The guard comes up to you and goes, what car do you drive? And so let me tell you what happened to the other guy. He answered that question. He goes, well, I drive a blah, 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 blah. And I would have said, well, I drove a Volkswagen Passat TDI diesel, gets 50 miles a gallon. If I'd have done that, he'd throw me in the pod for being a smart aleck. What they're asking is, what group do you run with? What race? And I think that was pretty weird. I'm not used to that because I'm from Montana. We don't think that way. But anyhow, big heavy set guy. I kind of wanted to go over to him, you know, a little later and go, well, which blimp club did you join? Just in my sense of humor.
Some of the guards were not so nice, or at least.
That's exact. Some were really mean. It's just like they felt like they controlled you or owned you and they could do whatever they wanted. Others were just fine, you know. I mean, they wouldn't talk to you and they couldn't even say anything or really say much, you know. I think that's just what they're told. But it's just unfortunate. I mean, it just creates a behavior. It's like, all it does is pit the people against the guards, is what it basically does, rather than, you know, having a good communication. Don't do this, don't do that. These are the rules, you know.
You feel the prison system is, you saw some flaws in it, huh?
Well, you know, there's flaws in everything, and just because you're a prisoner, I mean, they did a study with the universities. They had people put in prison. And these are all classmates. So they had prison guards and they had the prisoners. In less than a week's time, they were abusing the prison people, even though they're, you know, their own friends and stuff. It's just a mental thing that goes on. So there needs to be some education on the guards. I think there needs to be psychiatric evaluation on these guards and everything else. So some people should not be guards. It's not a good deal for anyone. So.
What was during this ordeal, what was your lowest point, and why? You
know, I didn't have a low point. I was actually excited about the whole thing. I mean, like I say, for me it was a vacation. My phone rings 24/7. I work 3 days, you know, with no sleep 4 or 5 hours and do it again. So to be in there was just kind of relaxing. I didn't have to think about nothing. I was just like chilling. Like I go on a vacation after working, you know, and I take off for a week. It takes 4 or 5 days just for my brain to shut down. So going through this, you know, yeah, it was pretty easy for me considering.
You preferred it, obviously. Well, that's a healthy way to look at it. And you obviously got you've got the pardon. You were pretty confident it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Just when you were officially told it, what was going through your mind? What were you thinking when they said to you, it's come through?
Well, you know, I actually did not think I was actually going to go to jail, because I knew I had enough information. Had I had a fair trial, we would have exposed everything. Had I seen what they had done, and even when I put the judge in notice, because I told the judge, you know, I said, I'm the type of guy, I see 20 guys beating someone up, I'll jump in there and take them out. I see, you know, a bunch of people beating up an officer, I'll take him out. But if I see an officer hurting someone, I said, I'll take him out just as easily. And I said that on the stand, because once I understood what happened January 6th, and I didn't until almost 2 years later, I knew what happened to me. Until 2 years into this, I met with a gentleman, it's a little over 2 years, but Tommy Tatum, who was there when Bolin was beaten to death, and then I understood the rest of the picture, what went on that day. And it all makes a lot more sense now, because, you know, that was a story that wasn't told. They kept censoring us every time we brought the information out. But, you know, and like I say, DC is supposed to announce from the front of the crowd to the back of the crowd before they use any form of lethal force. They violated their own laws. They assaulted me. I was assaulted by 2 officers. They tried to prevent me from bringing that information out. I actually released it. So my last, I had 3 attorneys and 6 judges. My second attorney dropped it all because he tried to get me a stipulated bench trial. I said, I'm not going to plead guilty to nothing. Why would you want me to sign this? And so he dumped all the information, everything that he had, which most January 6ers aren't supposed to see. It's amazing what our attorneys have that they don't share with us as clients. And that's unfortunate. That shouldn't be there. So when he dropped it all, I had the information, so we put a video together showing me be assaulted. I was assaulted twice and did nothing wrong. But that didn't even make a difference. Even in the court proceedings, they didn't even care, because we actually had an officer that was there, testified, and they weren't supposed to bring anyone into the court proceeding unless they were there specifically with me. You know what I'm saying? In that same area, it had to be a guard that was relative to me because they prevented me from bringing evidence in the same way. So they had to do the same. Well, when we went to court, they brought people in that had nothing to do with me and gave, testimony of different things like they do all J6ers, So here you have a guard that's testifying about something that has nothing to do with me, and he's given his testimony. So then we asked that gentleman on the stand, I said, is there any time that anyone should ever be assaulted, with a baton above the waist or anything? He said, never. And then we showed the video of me being struck over the head when I'm leaving the building. And I didn't even know at that time I was struck by that officer. I knew I was struck by an officer that had some shields, but I didn't know about the second assault, and it showed up in my discovery. And actually they said in there that I was trying to grab a baton. I was like, grab a baton? I didn't know what they were talking about. So when I looked at the video footage, there was a flag in front of my head. I remember something swinging over the top. I remember the guard yelling at me, but I didn't know what it was for. Well, he struck me over the head is what he did as I was leaving the building. And he's one of the people that I told, you need to get a guard over there, open the doors up, because we can't get out of the building. We were literally trapped in there in a mosh pit, and we couldn't get out of the building. So when they finally got the doors open up, we started to leave, and then people pushed back in, and that's when the guy assaulted me. So, and you can look at that video. I had no escape, none of us did. We were all beaten and pummeled the whole time. So this is turning into huge lawsuits. So right now there's 2 class action lawsuits against the government, one for 50 billion and one for 100 billion. And this is just the beginning. It's going to be even more than that because there's individual damages as well. So yeah, when this is all done, they're going to have to pay dearly for what they did, because this is criminal activity by our own government. And when you recognize the fact that every war we've ever fought as a nation has been illegitimate, set up by the bankers and the politicians to keep us all as slaves, you'll be really upset, especially when our military has gone there and fought battles. We weren't allowed to win and we had to play games and all that. It's very sad. And we're fighting an enemy that truly wasn't our enemy, was set up by them in the first place. That should make us all very concerned.
Where's the next thing for you?
Well, I have so many things I can do to make money. I mean, I've had to shut down my battery business. We had contracts for over $800 million to do that. So they've created a huge amount of damage against me. I mean, there's so many avenues I can get into. I mean, I do mining, I do appliance repair, I build weapon systems. There's probably not much I can't do. My biggest hurdle, and the hardest part for me, it would have been easier for me to be behind bars than to start and stop my business so many times, because they kept telling me I was going to go to jail. I felt like I didn't have a future. I couldn't plan a future. Had I known how this was going to turn out, I would have done things differently. But I couldn't be in a situation where I could expand or do anything because of where I was at the time. So I think that was the most stressful part of the whole thing, is I just felt like I could just maintain. And I hate being in the maintaining mode. I'm a guy that likes to go out and do something, expand, make things happen, make society a better place, come up with new technologies. That's what I love doing. So,
this disrupted your life, obviously. That
in a huge way. Yeah, I just don't, it's because I couldn't plan, I didn't know what the future held, and how this was going to go down. And I didn't want to start something really big and leave everyone hanging, start a big business, hire a bunch of employees and have to shut it all down, which I had to do several times anyways. It was a very difficult situation because we were in uncharted territory.
Some of the police union had mentioned that they were against, some of them were against the pardoning of these January 6ers. What would you say to these officers that felt like this was the wrong thing?
Well, I would say it this way. Anyone who says that it's wrong is probably part of the problem and part of the damages that were there. The problem is they're worried about getting sued now because they were the ones that created the situation. Whether they got the orders and they need to squeal on the people like Nancy Pelosi and the rest of them who gave the orders and was in control of command and control. So I even asked if there was a command and control center at the Capitol that day. They said no. Now it's come out that there is command and control. I have the evidence to prove that there is. Matter of fact, the area where Ashley Babbitt was shot, they always said, well, you shouldn't have entered the building, I said, the door's locked. You guys have the ability to lock the doors. What do you mean? They waved us in. And they said the doors can't be locked when the alarm system goes off. And I said, that's untrue. Now we have the video footage where Ashley Babbitt was actually shot. Command and control locked the doors. They couldn't open it from the inside or the outside. And this is DC. It's the most secure place in the world. To think that we can't have a command and control, can't lock the doors, and there isn't. Then you look at the video cameras and you see people panning the cameras around, zooming in on people. There's command and control. And now it's come out that they've actually admitted to it. So everything was a bold-faced lie. It was a trap. There's no other way to look at it. It was a trap, and it was there to steal the election. And at some point, you're going to find out that Biden did not win this election. It's going to be overturned, and all the pardons he's given to everybody is going to be null and void, and they're going to have to give testimony at this point because they can't plead the fifth, and they're all going to jail, and there'll be war tribunals at some point. Just like I told my judge, I said, when we get to the point, when I go to jail, I said, the day I go to jail, it's going to be what you knew and when you knew it. And I said, if it raises to the level of treason, I can have you executed by hanging and firing squad under Trump's PADs, which are presidential emergency action documents, which will be revealed to the public at some point here. And that's where we're going with all this.
It's obvious this hasn't changed your opinion on anything.
No, I've been right all along. All the conspiracy theories that people talk about now, just like they did in Congress, you know, we're, 32-0. I mean, we just keep adding up, the amount of times we've been right. So yeah, I mean, everyone's seen. I think a lot of people are just afraid to speak out. People come here all the time, love what I'm doing. I think they're afraid because they have some family member that's liberal and they want to keep the peace. They don't say anything. But I would say, 98% of the people just love what I'm doing. They're still fearful, but they're fearful of either government, because association, or someone in their family. But most people just support me, and they come in all the time and tell me so.
Would you have done, looking back on that day, January 6th, would you have done anything differently now that you have the gift of hindsight?
Actually, no and yes. So if I would have known at the time I could have been arrested for going in the building and not knowing the outcome, yes, I would not have been in there. On the other side of the coin, knowing what I know now, no, it's the greatest time to be alive. I'm glad I'm there. So I'm glad I didn't have a vision of what could happen unless I know the end game. Because I know when this is all done, one, we win our country back. I just feel like I've always been a digital soldier behind the scenes. Never thought I'd be on the front line in this battle or in this fight. But now it's a great honor to be here. And I mean, I'm just part of the solution rather than just being part of the problem and just allowing it to continue. Not that I would have allowed that, but I mean, I just think I was put in the right place at the right time, Right. I just felt like it's David versus Goliath. And matter of fact, that's what I put on my Facebook page when I went to DC. And they used that against me to try to prosecute me, that I had intent to be there because I said I was like David versus Goliath. Can you believe that? But this is where we're at. We're standing against the giants.
People talk about the conspiracy. Do you ever, and obviously you believe it from what I'm saying. I mean, you believe this is a conspiracy. Do you ever question that potentially that you maybe have gotten mixed up on it, that you've been misled? Could the conspiracy be wrong?
No, because at this point we've been right on everything. So, I mean, how would you think otherwise? I mean, at this point, no. We've been right all along the way. So it's just a matter of time for the rest of it comes out, and you understand there's a plan to take our country back. I mean, that's the only conspiracy left on the table at this point, because we know the other things are happening. So is there really, a government or Trump as part of a military operation to get our country back, which is what Q represents? It's not QAnon. QAnon was set up by the press and everything else. And if you look at the Q post, Q is military. Anons are people like you and me who interpret the Q post, and then QAnon was just a label they put on us by the media.
Do you believe the president did direct the January 6th for you guys to go in there and overturn the election? And do you believe he's still directing you?
Well, I don't believe he told us to overturn in any election. I think he, like he said, go over peacefully and patriotically, make our voices known. I mean, we have the right to bring our grievances before government. So this isn't the first time this happened. Look at what happened to our military. Our military was promised benefits. They showed up at the Capitol and they protested. Maybe they were a month or so period of time, and then finally they had to bring other military troops to push them out of there because they didn't give them what was rightfully theirs. So this isn't the first time our government has used force to browbeat us, and they've even did, like I say, our bravest and our best people who go into the military to defend our country and wouldn't even honor their agreements with them. That's unfortunate. There was people that even came to our country from Germany who fought on the war and were supposed to give citizenships, and then they tried to renege on all those. So to think that our government is doing what's right, that's a lie. And I mean, I think we believe it's just because we go to court and we're found guilty, or we go before a judge, or we're charged with something. It's like the holy of holies. You must have done something wrong or you wouldn't be charged. The belief that we're the greatest nation in the world is the biggest deception on the American people. We're not the greatest because of education. We're not the greatest because of all the metrics you would measure us by. The reason why we're the greatest nation in the world is we've always had the ability to defeat tyranny, and here we are again. That's what makes us great. And we set the charge for the rest of the world. And if the rest of the world is going to heal, it's because the U.S. stands up, says we will not do this, and we set an example, and then the whole world changes because of it. If America falls, the world falls. We can't allow that to happen. We have a huge responsibility. And we're all foreigners that are here. We all immigrated here to get away from tyranny. That's what made America what it is foreigners that come here. But we just need people to come here legally and do it the right way, learn our language, learn, what the Constitution means. But see, that's what they did. They tried to steer us away from all those things that made us important and gave us authority over government. And by letting people come in here, then they don't know what laws are, they don't know what governance is. And so then we have chaos, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Are they, what's your future? What are you going to do next?
Well, my biggest thing right now, more than anything else, is hold them all accountable, because we can't have peace until there's justice. So that's where we're at right now. So no, I won't remain silent. I'm going to keep speaking up. What I do in the near future, business and all that, I don't know. I mean, there's so many directions I can go in, but we can't let off the throttle now. We're in the lead. We're exposing the fraud that's going on, and we just need to bring it to its conclusion. So that's where I'm at.
You avoided, a long time. What were you sentenced to? Can I ask?
So they were trying to get me 20 years for the 1512. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to give you that. I ended up with 2 years, but it could anywhere been, it could be from 3 to 10 years is probably what you could have gotten if the 1512 did not get thrown out. So
you were looking at time in prison. I mean, you're spared. You were pardoned. You're free. You're not going to you don't want to just sit back and be quiet and live
no, and to be honest with you,
anymore?
I wouldn't have needed a pardon. If I could have brought the information for it, I wouldn't need a pardon. This whole thing would have gone away for everybody. It's not that you did anything wrong. It's just how our judicial system works at this point. So there's no discovery. There's no way to, I wouldn't even say argue the facts, because there are no facts there. Everything's assumptions, presumption, and lies at best, You're basically going up against a system that made up their mind, and they're going to railroad everybody, and that's what we saw. And that's just not the way our system should work.
Right.
The question is, if we lived under the Constitution, how the Constitution works, and I want everyone to understand, because it's a biblical principle, and this is why instead of going to a jury trial, I went to a bench trial. Because when they did a jury trial, they said, crucify Jesus, release Barabbas. So judgment fall on God's people. And I didn't want that to happen in the U.S., so I wanted to hold the judge responsible. And the judge denied me several times. Finally had to allow me to have a bench trial because I wanted to hold them accountable, not have it fall on people that, have no idea what's going on, who listen to whatever the judge tells them, instructs them as a jury, and you can't bring evidence in anyways. And so it's 100% conviction rate in a jury trial. And I knew I'd still get convicted even if I had a judge, but at least I would put in the burden of responsibility on the judge, and then we can remove these people from their lofty positions and hold them accountable for their actions, because it's what they knew and when they knew it. And they were instructed, but they failed to do what was right, and they allowed it to happen. So that's what's really disturbing about the whole thing.
Anything you want to do in your personal life? You're next. Now that you're kind of done, at least with that part of your.
Yeah, part of me wants to bring out new technology for the world. I mean, I designed devices for automobiles, increase the fuel mileage, eliminate the pollution, the lowest emissions ever recorded. So, I mean, I can do things like that. I build batteries that last forever, never go bad. So there's a lot of things we can do, especially in the energy market and all that I haven't even patented or anything of that nature, that we can actually literally change the world. But if we don't fix our country, what good is it to bring out these technologies that can be used by the wrong players to once again enslave us rather than make us all free? So my goal is to make everyone independent of the system, so government has to come to us if they want to survive, because we don't need them no more. So that's ultimately where I'll be heading with the things I'm about to do.
It sounds like you're not done with this fight.
No, we're just actually in the beginning stages of it. So the rest was just in a holding pattern because we couldn't do anything. We were just basically hostages for a period of time. But now we're back in the battlefield, and now it's our turn to, hold these people accountable. Put them behind bars for a change.
There you go. night.